this is James here with your Oracle Outlook for the week starting October the 8th, 2018. This week I was feeling inclined to work with a deck that I haven't worked with in a while, and this is why. Over the course of the week I had a dream in which I was showing someone how to read playing cards. So that was very significant. I love when I have card reading dreams. And it got me to thinking that I hadn't worked with any of my playing card decks, and that could be any deck that has playing cards on them. And so I started going through my collection to see what deck could I use this week, and I decided that I was going to work with one of my Gypsy Witch card decks. So the deck that I chose is the Gypsy Witch Fortune Telling Oracle Cards by Lynn Boyle. And Lynn produces this deck or sells it through her shop on Etsy, which is called Aquarius Wellbeing. So I will leave a link to Lynn's shop in the description box below in case you feel like you want to know more about the deck, or if you're a collector like me and it speaks to you, you could learn more about how you can acquire it and add it to your own deck collection. So here's how I got verification of that, because I usually like to share stories about deck selection. So after I decided on the deck, just this morning, as I was preparing for today's shoot, I got a flash of a card from the deck. So I will talk about the card in case it shows up. So the card was the Shepherd card. And what happens is when I see a card, I'm immediately giving a message as to what to say if the card should show up in a reading. So the card is Shepherd, so I will be posting an image probably right about here as I'm talking, so you could see the card, and it will be interesting to see if the card shows up. Now, if it shows up, I will tell you what the message was in the moment that the card shows up, but if for some reason it doesn't, I will remind myself to talk about the message because it still may be pertinent at the end of the reading. So again, we are working with the Gypsy Witch Fortune Telling Oracle Cards by Lynn Boyle, and I have the deck on hand. So now I'm going to take a few moments to shuffle the cards. And as I do every week when I do these weekly general readings, I like to focus on an intention. And the intention usually is, what do we need to know for the week ahead? And I've been talking about the underlying unspoken intention in that question. And usually it is about receiving the messages, the insight, and the guidance that will be most helpful in moving forward. So I'm thinking about those intentions as I shuffle. I'm feeling like I want to shuffle the cards my secondary way, which is like this. And I'm feeling one more time will be great. All right. So now I'm going to go ahead and cut the deck. And now I'm going to fan the cards out. And now we're going to be picking 5 cards from the fan that are getting my attention. That is 2, 3, we need 2 more. I'm going to go with this one as 4, and this one as 5. So I have the 5 cards selected, and I'm taking the remainder of the deck and I'll put that to one side. So now I have the 5 cards face down, and just as I do when I work with most systems, like Lenormand, Kipper, even playing cards, I'll start with the middle card. For me, the middle card always represents the central issue or something that we're being asked to focus on for the upcoming week. And the card here is, okay, so here we have the cat card. So cat as a symbol, because again, like I talked about with the steampunk tea leaf fortune telling cards, I tend to look at the Gypsy Witch cards as symbolic divination, because just like Lenormand and that system, there is a symbol on the card. So cat as a symbol for me can represent this idea of independence. So for a lot of us this week, there may be collective energy in terms of focus, concentration, attention on this idea of independence. How can we seek a greater sense of independence? Because I'm not a cat owner, but what I do know about my experience with cats is that unlike dogs, because I grew up with dogs and I'm a dog lover, is that cats kind of go off and do their own thing, and they come when they need something from their owner, kind of thing, and then then they go off again. So for me, this is about independence. How can we create a greater sense of independence for ourselves this week? And also too, as I'm saying that, when we take the time to become more independent, more self-sufficient, that kind of thing, we also allow other people to do the same, because I'm a big believer in that the energy that we put out into the world creates a ripple effect, and people watch what I call our demonstration. So there may be a need, because there's 2 cats on the card, so there may be a need for focus and attention on fostering a greater sense of independence, and as you do that, someone else benefits from that because they get to see that demonstration. So I'm seeing all of that with the cat cards. Now, another thing with the cat card is that, according to the text on the card, this is a card that represents flattery. So this could just be a week where we are either giving flattering statements, I'm thinking like compliments to other people, or that we're going to be on the receiving end of flattering statements or compliments, things of that nature. Because again, there are 2 cats on the card, so this could be about a relationship or an interaction or an exchange between ourselves and someone else, or other people, just generally speaking. So I'm seeing that. So it could just be a matter of, if you're feeling inclined to extend a compliment to someone else, do it. And if you're on the receiving end of a compliment, pay attention to your thoughts and your feelings about receiving the compliment, right? I'm a big believer in that when we talk about, this idea about being receptive and receiving, in a larger sense, we talk about abundance and manifestations and things like that in the spiritual sense. It starts with receiving small things like a compliment, right? And so pay attention this week to how you react in terms of thoughts or words when you are on the receiving end of a compliment or compliments this week. Now, it could also be the underlying thing here with cats in a more challenging sense is, again, paying attention to flattery could just be a matter of what's the underlying intention or motivation of the person extending the flattering statement or the compliment. Because cats in a challenging sense can be something that is self-serving. So, it could just be like flattery for one's own personal gain kind of thing. It reminds me of, and I'm sharing a personal story here, it reminds me of one time I was in high school in a class. It was an English class. And we were sitting in a circular formation in the class. And the teacher said the word sycophant. And a sycophant is a person who flatters for personal gain. And the minute she said sycophant, everyone seemed to look in the room at me. And I'm thinking, like, what's going on? Like, that's not me. But apparently there was this perception that I was a person who flattered for personal gain, although I don't think I was. But I never forgot that. So I'm seeing that experience to get me to say the word to this card. So it's, again, twofold. Number one, pay attention to how you react and respond to compliments, flattering statements this week. And also to keep in mind what's the underlying intention and motivation behind the compliment. So this is where we have to consider the source. That idea when people say something and it may not be in the best light and you have a reaction and response to it, we go like, well, consider the source, meaning like, take into account where it's coming from. Are you giving it that much more weight than it deserves because of where it came from, right? So it's just a matter of that. If you're seeing that somebody is flattering for personal gain, that kind of thing, then consider the source, right? So this week, that's a lot with cat. Again, I'm going to repeat, focusing on how can we create a greater sense of independence with the idea that that may be allowing a demonstration for someone else who needs to see that, right? And as a psychologist, we call that modeling or learned behavior, right? So there's that. Another thing is just paying attention to flattery and considering the source of the flattery. So that's cats. All right, so now let's take a look at the surrounding cards because they're going to offer possibly more about the central issue. So taking a look at the card on the far left. Oh, this is great. Okay. So here we have the man card, and the reason why I'm laughing is because I shared that personal story about being called a sycophant in class and having everybody look at me in response to that. So that's very funny that this card would follow up that personal story. So having said that, the man card can represent a man. If you're a woman watching this video, it could represent a man that has a significant role in the situations that unfold for you this week. And if you're a male, then the man card can represent you. So usually that's the only thing that is attributed to this card. It usually just represents a man. So again, if you're female, this would be a man who's playing a significant role or part in how things unfold for you, especially because it's at the start of the line. And if you're a man, then this card could represent you. So that is the man card. The interesting thing I will note about the man card, at this point, two things. As I was about to say the one thing, another thing jumped out at me. So the first thing is that he is not facing the rest of the cards in the line. So this could be, again, a man who's trying to put things behind him. He's trying to exit a situation because he's looking outside of the line. So he could be exiting a situation. So this may be about a man who's creating energy around exiting a situation, that kind of thing. Or that his attention and his focus for the future is on something that's either unknown or undetermined because there's not a card next to him, right? So there is that to consider. I'm going to go with the idea that's making me feel like about maybe recent things in the past or putting things behind him, that kind of thing. Now, the other thing that jumped at me as I looked at the card is that the playing card insert here is the Two of Hearts. So going with the cats, where I talked about this interaction between maybe ourselves and another person, this is validating that because the Two of Hearts is a card that represents relationships. It represents sharing feelings and emotions, you know, something of a mutual thing. I always call this the I feel the same way card, you know, or the feeling is mutual kind of thing. It could also be about extending some kind of help in a relationship. So somebody may need emotional help or emotional support because the Suit of Hearts for me represents feelings, emotions, and relationships, right? It could also be, too, if somebody's in a stage of a relationship where they're taking the time to get to know somebody else better, then the Two of Hearts is a card that can represent compatibility. Like, are we compatible? That kind of thing. But it makes me feel like this may be a time where we're sharing maybe, you know, how we feel about something, you know, sharing emotions, feelings, that kind of thing, or someone is going to be either seeking some kind of emotional help or support. And then the two, again, is a number of balance. So we had this idea about giving and receiving where I talked about with cats, you know, with the idea about, you know, flattery and compliments. So there's this giving and energy kind of thing, again, going on with that. And so I'm going to go back to the cats card for a moment because I did not talk about the playing card insert. Sometimes when I'm working with this deck, the playing card inserts jump out at me immediately, and then sometimes they take some time. I'm going to go back to what I said about the Two of Hearts. Here we have the Eight of Hearts on the cat card. So the Eight of Hearts can represent a friend. This card can usually represent a good friend. You know, so there may be a friendship that we're talking about here. Or again, this idea maybe where a friendship, you know, we're focusing energy on a friendship, and with the idea that there may be emotional help or support that a friend needs, or that we are contemplating, exploring, you know, changing the dynamics of a friendship, you know, and we're moving into a different area, and we're taking the time to explore that, you know, to see how it feels. Again, with the hearts. Hearts represents feelings and emotions, so we may be slowly moving into a new direction with a particular friendship or relationship, and we're trying to see how it feels, right? But the Eight of Hearts for me can represent a friend or a very good friend. So there's that to consider. All right, so now let's take a look at what's between the man card and the cat card. And so here we have, the lilies. And so the first thing that I want to say is that lilies for me can represent something old. So here we have, with the man card coming before it, we have the man turning away from the lilies card. So this could just be, again, if we go with the idea that a man is trying to exit a situation, trying to create energy around that, then the lilies could be about wanting to leave something behind from the past. If we go with the idea that the word old is a pun for the past. So this could be a man who's putting energy into trying to put the past behind him. If that resonates with you in any way, then the lilies would be asking you, as you're moving forward or you're moving away from that. Now my phone is ringing, so I'm going to allow that to ring, and then you'll hear my message turn on. So now I will share this, as I always say, or as I said last week especially, or was it the week before, but I said in a previous reading that everything is part of the experience. So I'm going to allow the phone ringing at that particular moment in time to confirm or validate the message that I was about to say. So this was it. If you're a man and you are putting the past behind you, going with lilies behind the man, then the lilies is offering you this message because it's also about wisdom and experience. So if you're trying to put the past behind you, then from a spiritual standpoint, and I always talk with the idea that a lot of the people who look at my readings, I tend to believe that they're spiritual people, conscious people, people who are in the process of waking up, those kinds of things. People who are interested in their own sense of self-awareness, right? So going with that, lilies is about asking you, what did you learn from that past or prior experience, going with the idea that this is about wisdom and experience. I tend to look at lilies as wisdom gained from experience, right? So this could just be a matter of, wisdom gained from an experience in the past, and you've learned the lesson, and now you're moving on, right? So there's that. It could also be that there is an energy trying to be put into restoring peace, harmony, or tranquility about an experience, because that's, again, lilies for me can also represent peace, harmony, and tranquility, right? Going with that. Now, if we choose to look at lilies as describing the man, then this could be somebody who's older, going with the idea that it could represent an older person. For me, this could represent somebody who's a senior or an elder, so it could just be somebody who's older. It could also be somebody who's more mature, so not necessarily older in age, but somebody who's very mature, right? So there is that to consider. So again, if it's not about a man who's putting the past behind him and being encouraged to ask himself, what has he learned from that past experience in terms of wisdom being gained, then it could just be a matter of the cards are describing a more mature man, an older man, that kind of thing. And then that could be either one of two things. This could be the person who may need help, if we go with the idea that cats can represent with the Eight of Hearts, somebody who needs help and assistance. So this could be a mature man, an older man who may need help and support, or that this is a person who's going to play a role in offering help or support of an emotional nature, right? So that could be it. Or it could also be two. Here's the thing. Somebody may actually be dealing with, and this is more for maybe a woman or women watching this, or even, it could be a man too. But somebody who's dealing with maybe a man from their past and having to deal with that. Because it's making me feel like in that particular case, somebody may be coming back in or coming back on the scene, like somebody from the past. And now we're faced with how do we want to handle that, right? Because I'm hearing, I hear old songs, right? So I'm hearing an old song by Shalimar called The Second Time Around. So for somebody, there may be that kind of energy dealing with that, and that may involve a man from the past. Now, I'm looking at the playing card insert on the lilies. And so this is the Seven of Clubs. And so for me, this card can represent putting energy. This card can be about work, right? The suit of clubs for me represents work or effort. So this could be about working on something or putting some effort into improving a situation, because the Seven of Clubs can represent improving, work improvement or improving a situation through effort. So I'm seeing that. It could also be a signal for some sort of small difficulties. This is a small difficulties card. Small difficulties, right? And it could be tied to a past experience or a prior experience, going with lilies. But it could also be too, like if we're exchanging with another person and talking about conversation, right? Because we now remember going back to cats and cat's about flattery, and so flattery is usually something that we offer through words, through communication, then this may be giving us a heads up for possible challenges with communicating with other people, because sometimes I see this as an argument. You know, Seven of Clubs is an argument. And with that, so if it's about an argument, then the lilies, as a follow-up, could be offering about how do we restore peace, harmony, and tranquility in light of an argument. So there is that. So now let's take a look at what's on the other side of the cats. Okay, so no mistake, here we are with the Rider card. So now the first thing that I want to offer, the Rider is a symbol about news and messages, and I had just literally talked about conversation and communication, right? So there is that. But this card usually represents news or messages being delivered. So again, this could just be a heads up for communication, news or messages. Now this would expand that. So Rider can deliver all types of news or messages. It doesn't have to be in one type of mode. So it doesn't necessarily just have to be verbal communication. It could be, in this day and age, it could be texts, it could be emails, things of that nature. But being on the lookout for particular news or messages. Now, it could also be, too, if we mirror the cards, then we have mirroring lilies. So now we just talked about lilies can be this idea about something from the past, possibly. Then the Rider, in this case, could be about a visit or arrival. So this could just be something from the past coming back up, because it's arriving on the scene. It could also be, you know, old news, old messages, you know, something of that nature. But this card could just represent this idea of something from the past coming back up. In addition to that, it could also be, if we go with the idea that lilies represents peace, harmony, tranquility, then the pair could literally represent peace, harmony, tranquility arrives, right? So it could just be a matter of taking the steps to work out something from the past in a peaceful, harmonious way, right? So I'm seeing that. Now, here we have, as the insert, we have the Jack of Diamonds, and so for me, the Jack of Diamonds is a card that can represent information that has some value, right? Because jacks in playing card cartomancy, for me anyway, represent news, messages, and messengers, right? So somebody may be playing the role of a messenger, and they're offering with their message some information that is valuable. It's important. So it may not be about money, because diamonds is the suit that represents money. It may not be about money per se, but the message or the information will have some value attached to it. So that is how I would look at Rider and the Jack of Diamonds. Right? So as I'm looking at this, I'm looking at the cards. Now we have a suit of hearts, the Eight of Hearts, and followed by the Jack of Diamonds. So this is about emotional rewards, right? Again, hearts represents feelings, emotions, relationships even, and then diamonds as a follow-up would describe the first suit. So diamonds, again, represents being successful with something, but also something that's rewarding. So this could just be about finding, especially if we're having some challenge, resolving a past issue connected to a person, it's about finding the value or what's rewarding in that particular relationship, especially with the Eight of Hearts being about a friendship or a very good friend, right? That kind of thing. So now let's take a look at the last card, rounding the line out. And here we have, okay, so here we have the ship. So the ship is a card that can represent travel in the literal sense. So we could have here news or messages that have to do about travel, right? So that would be the first thing if we pair Rider and ship. So this could be news or messages about travel. Another message here could be news or messages that come from far away, because ship in that regard can represent things foreign or something abroad or something from overseas, that kind of thing. I'm looking at it this way. Ship can also metaphorically represent something about moving forward, right? This is a card for me that represents movement, and it's very interesting. Both the Rider and the ship card represent movement. So there's something about something moving forward, right, with these two cards, right? But this card can represent, the ship card can represent something moving forward, progression, advancement, you know, that kind of thing. So it could also be, too, if we're talking about this idea of resolving something from the past and wanting to move beyond it, if we go with the idea that the gentleman is exiting the line. So this could be about setting sail, you know, because it's making me feel like setting sail, sailing off into the sunset, those kinds of things. So it could just be a matter of we get our wish, which is the Nine of Hearts, as the insert. The Nine of Hearts in cartomancy is the wish card. So we get some emotional gain, or we get our wish fulfilled, and it may involve something progressing, something moving forward, or that someone who's making an exit is able to do so, and it allows us to kind of set sail to a situation, or, you know, sailing off into the sunset kind of thing. It makes me feel like something being resolved. And it's resolved, so it allows you to move forward, right? That person or that resolution of that situation, you know, that thing that moves on allows you to also do the same, right? So this is about moving on. Now, also too, going with that, if we go with the idea that this card can represent travel in the metaphorical sense, this represents our journey through life. So the ship can represent life journey or spiritual journey, that kind of thing. And so now if we go with the idea with lilies, what we talked about, wisdom gained through an experience or wisdom gained through a past experience, then you learn the lesson, the wisdom has been gained, and you get to move on into the next leg, stage, or phase in your life journey or your spiritual journey overall. If you go with the idea that wisdom is about gaining some kind of enlightenment, then that may serve you moving forward in your spiritual journey. So on that note, I'm going to go ahead and end this week's Oracle Outlook. I'm James Himm Mitchell, and as I close, I'd like to thank you for sharing space here with me for this week's reading, and I look forward to sharing the same space with you again in our next video reading together. So until then, I'm hoping that you have a wonderful day, and I'm hoping that you have a wonderful week. Take care. Hi, I'm back. I realized when I ended the video, I didn't share what the Shepherd card meant. So I realized that I ended the video and I'm like, oh wait, I was supposed to talk about what the Shepherd card meant. I was supposed to remind myself, and I reminded myself after I ended the previous segment. So I want to take a few moments to talk about the Shepherd card. So I have the card here, and again, I will post it right here so you could see it. So this was the card that came to me in a flash when I was contemplating deck selection, right? Which is a common thing that happens for me, and I tend to look at it as a way of validating the deck choice, for myself. So, but I really got a strong message, so I'm going to share this because I'm a big believer in that the message may resonate with someone, right? So, Shepherd for me is a card that can represent a teacher or a leader, somebody who's in that kind of position. And I usually go with the idea with the word shepherd, that it usually implies somebody who is a spiritual leader or a spiritual teacher. So for some of us this week, with the message of shepherd, is that we may be either one or two things. We may be needing to take some time and energy, putting some focus or attention on spiritual teachings. You know, so if you follow a particular spiritual path, whatever the teachings are of that particular path, this may be a week where you are going to be asked or encouraged or inspired to delve more into some of the teachings in that path. There may be also teachings of a particular person, teacher, leader, that kind of thing, associated with that path. So I'll give you an example. For me, going again with the idea of shepherd, is I come from a Christian background, and so for me it makes me think of the Good Shepherd, and that is a word or a phrase or a name for Christ, right? So that's an example. So if you follow a Christian path, it may be, you know, the teachings of Christ. You know, if you're a Buddhist, it may be the teachings of Buddha. You know, whatever your path is, if there is a teacher or a leader that's associated with that path, it may be a time where you are delving more into what is it that that person offered in terms of wisdom, guidance, going with the idea of lilies in the line, keeping this relative to what came before. Lilies would represent an elder, but also somebody who has learned or gained wisdom from past experiences, right? So it would be a person who's sharing the wisdom of their experience in accordance to a particular path, right, or tradition kind of thing. So I'm seeing that with shepherd in that regard, and in my own personal case, so, I talk about being a Christian, but I'm more of a metaphysical Christian. So, we call it Christian metaphysics, and those of you who follow the path will know what I'm talking about. And with that idea in metaphysics, we look at everything being about the mind, so spirit could be called infinite intelligence, divine mind, one mind. I'm a big believer in that. Spirit is so universal. We have many names for it, and we, as the individual having a personal experience with spirit, get to choose the right and perfect name that works and resonates with us. So those are some of the names that I have for spirit: infinite intelligence, divine mind, one mind. And with that in mind, pun intended, then the shepherd card can represent Christ consciousness. So it may be, if you're not maybe a more traditional mainstream type of Christian, and you have adopted maybe a more metaphysical approach to that, then this would be about Christ consciousness, right? And how can you be more in touch with the Christ consciousness that resides within you, or that you see and behold the Christ consciousness that is within other people. Now, going back to the reading itself, especially if you're having conflict with another people, for me personally, we talk about this idea about beholding the Christ. So we behold the Christ in ourselves, and we behold the Christ in other people. But I don't want to make this just all about Christian, because there are some people who get turned off by that, and I apologize if that's the case. But I'm just only talking again from my own personal experience, and so that's the place where I have the most, experience as a Christian per se. So, but whatever you would call that in whatever your particular faith or spiritual path is, then by all means, please use that name. But for me, I talk about Christ consciousness, so it's about beholding the Christ or the divinity in another person, right? So there is that. Now, the shepherd has a flock of sheep around him in the image, so this could also be about, the company that we keep, right? So this could be about, putting energy or attention or focus into finding a flock, which is a word for community, of like-minded people, right? So if you are embarking on something having to do with your spiritual path, then this could just be a matter of you seeking out like-minded people to be in community with, right? So there is that. Now, the challenge here could be about, sheep sometimes can be gullible, and so it could just be a matter of the message I got with that in that regard is that this could also be a week where we're being encouraged to think for ourselves. It's one thing to have a spiritual teacher or a spiritual leader giving us information as food for thought, but that doesn't dismiss the responsibility that we all have as individuals receiving the information to think for ourselves. So this could just be a week where we are contemplating the information that we are receiving from spiritual teachers and asking ourselves the questions, what do I think about that? Does that resonate with me? Do I believe that to be true? And if you don't, that's okay. The information coming in, getting you to ask those questions, is also setting the stage for you to get more in touch, because now remember I talked about self-awareness earlier, right? To get more in touch with what is true for you. And sometimes the best way that we learn about what is true for us is by hearing or experiencing something that we know for sure is not our truth. So allow yourself, if you're hearing something or you're receiving something and you have a reaction like, I just don't believe that, great. Then ask yourself the other question, if I don't believe that, what do I believe? Because this is getting me to clarify that. So again, shepherd is about a spiritual leader, spiritual teacher. Now that could be twofold. Either you are seeking the guidance of a spiritual teacher or leader, or somebody is actually taking the steps to become more of a spiritual teacher or leader in their community. So there is that. So it could be twofold with that. It could also be if you are on a spiritual path or spiritual tradition that you are being encouraged inspired to take a deeper dive into the spiritual teachings associated with that path. If you are embarking on your spiritual journey, then this could just be a time where you are wanting to congregate with like-minded people. You know, the idea about strength in numbers kind of thing. So, you know, being around like-minded people, people who believe the same way you believe, that kind of thing. And also, too, as we consider, because remember I said consider the source, as we receive spiritual teaching, spiritual guidance, spiritual wisdom of someone else, somebody outside of ourselves, we're being asked to also do a check with ourselves and ask ourselves, do I believe that? Is that true for me? And if not, allow that to create the space for you to find what is true for you and what you do believe. So now, on that note, I will go ahead and for the second time end this week's Oracle Outlook. Thank you for hanging in there with me for this extra added insight and guidance. I hope, since the card didn't show up in the initial reading, I hope that it was helpful and it resonated with whoever it needed to resonate with. And so, again, James and Mitchell, wrapping up this week's Oracle Outlook, and I will see you in the same space again next week. Take care.
Mm-hmm.